This is Marriage Wisdom for Wives Who Want a Long Marriage. And today I want to talk about something that doesn't get explained well. People talk about communication in marriage like it's just about talking more. But communication doesn't always disappear with arguments. Sometimes it disappears quietly. And that quiet can be one of the loneliest places to live. I want to talk about what silence in marriage actually feels like. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, but the kind that feels heavy. Because if you've lived through it, you know exactly what I mean. Silence in marriage doesn't always mean nobody's talking. Sometimes there's conversation. Sometimes there's routine. Sometimes there's laughter. But emotionally, there's distance. It feels like you're explaining yourself over and over, but nothing changes. It feels like you're choosing your words carefully, not because you're being thoughtful, but because you don't want another shutdown, another misunderstanding, another cold response. So you start editing yourself. You say, never mind. You say, it's fine. You say, I don't care. But you do care. You care deeply. You're just tired of trying to be understood. From the outside, everything looks fine. You're still married. You're still showing up. You're still cooking, still cleaning, still handling life. So people assume you're okay. They don't see the emotional isolation. They don't see how lonely it feels to be in the same room with someone you love and still feel unseen. That's why silence hurts more than arguments sometimes. Because arguments at least means someone is engaging. Silence feels like being emotionally dismissed. I remember early in my marriage feeling this way. Not because there wasn't love, not because there wasn't commitment, but because we didn't always know how to communicate safely. I didn't always feel heard, and I didn't always know how to say what I needed without it turning into tension. And over time, silence feels easier than explaining yourself again. A lot of wives live right there. They don't stop loving, they stop talking. Let me say this clearly. Silence is not always punishment. Silence is often protection. When someone feels dismissed long enough, they stop offering their inner world. Not because they don't care, but because caring starts to hurt. That's not peace, that's emotional survival. Communication doesn't break down because one person stops talking. It breaks down when emotional safety disappears. When someone feels misunderstood, minimized, brushed off, corrected instead of heard, ignored instead of acknowledged, they retreat. And retreat turns into distance. Distance turns into resentment. Resentment turns into emotional walls. That's how silence grows. Over time, silence changes you. You become quieter. You become less expressive. You stop sharing ideas. You stop sharing dreams. You stop sharing frustrations. Not because you don't have them, but because you don't feel safe laying them down. And the danger is this: you can live together for years while emotionally growing apart. That's how people wake up one day and realize they become roommates instead of partners. Now, I want to be very clear. This isn't about blaming husbands. This isn't about attacking marriages. This isn't about tearing anyone down. A lot of people were never taught emotional communication. They grew up in homes where feelings weren't discussed, where silence was normal, where vulnerability wasn't safe. So sometimes silence isn't intentional, but the pain is still real. Healthy communication requires emotional maturity, humility, accountability, willingness to listen, respect, not just talking, not just explaining, but receiving what the other person is saying. Communication cannot be one-sided. One person cannot carry all the emotional labor. That leads to exhaustion and eventually withdrawal. I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too much. You're not asking for too much. You are not weak for needing connection. You are human, and wanting to feel emotionally safe in your marriage is not a flaw. For me, what changed wasn't pretending. It wasn't silence. It wasn't stuffing feelings. It was learning how to communicate without fear, and learning when to speak and when to pause. Long marriages don't avoid hard seasons. They learn how to walk through them. If silence has become familiar in your marriage, don't ignore it. Pay attention to it. Name it. Understand it. Because silence doesn't mean the absence of love. It often means the presence of pain. And the earlier it's addressed, the more room there is for healing. Marriage wisdom isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. And awareness is where long marriages grow.